explain the rules of engagement a little later on. Hint, hint, there are very few rules. Hint, hint, there are no rules. But it's a space where young people are brought together to speak about topical issues, to have conversations with each other that can inform government about what some of the issues, but also what are some of the solutions that we need to find for pressing issues. Often people say we must talk about youth issues. I'm firmly of the view that every issue in South Africa is a youth issue because we're the majority of the population. And whether you're talking about pension grants or you're talking about ECD, there are young people who are affected by those issues, even more severely sometimes than the people who are the topic of conversation. So we see the space as a space we're free and open. But we are also at a university for the first time in BackChat's history. We are at UJ, and so before we get into too much detailed content, I'm going to ask the VC, Prof Marwala, to just introduce, welcome us.
Good evening. Sanibonani. Dumelang. No, thank you very much for coming. You mentioned that there are no rules. There must be some rules. The rule is that this is an engagement. It's an intellectual engagement, not a physical engagement. I think that's very, very important. It is an intellectual, not a physical one. And the reason for that is because one of the things that are needed to drive any society are ideas. Societies that do not have ideas ultimately die. So if our young people are not generating new ideas, then we are doomed. So the rule of engagement is that let us exercise, let us express ourselves to the best of our abilities intellectually. Now, the University of Johannesburg is a university, Deputy Minister, of ideas. It is the university that is driving the agenda of the fourth industrial revolution. And we have been engaging, and I have not seen some of our student leaders, on the future of work. You know, every week we are having a conversation in our Institute of Advanced Studies on the future of work. What does work mean in the fourth industrial revolution, where robots are actually entering our lives? And we are also even thinking about what is a robot, because sometimes people say, no, these ideas don't matter to us because, you know, the issues of robots are not issues of a developing country. I always say that if you use Microsoft Word, you are using a robot. Because for those of us who are as old as I am, and you can see by my white hair, I'm old. I'm not that old, you know. I'm not that old. You would know that about 30 years ago, if you wanted to type anything, you would use a typewriter. If you make a mistake, there was no delete button. Then a computer came, and the earlier computers, if you forget to save your document was lost. Still remember those days. Then you will type your document and you'll go and get somebody who can be able to correct the grammar and the spelling, isn't it? You know? Now you don't do that. A robot does that. You know, the software that the Microsoft Word looks at what you're writing, and if it is not spelled correctly, it sometimes actually corrects it for you, autocorrect, you know. So all these things that used to require somebody to be employed to do are no longer necessary. So this is really what we're talking about. So Deputy Minister, you have chosen the right university to host this event. We are glad that you were not tempted to to host this engagement at another university in Braamfontein. It does not deserve to be mentioned by name. I used to be a professor there, so I know. I know what I'm not missing, you know. So you chose well to come here and engage these young people, you know, and so that we can take our society forward. Unfortunately, I am going to China, you know, so I am not going to stay. The reason why I'm going to leave is not because I don't want to engage you. I want to engage you, you know, I can see you have been very excited on Facebook, you know, and I really wanted to engage, but unfortunately I would have to run to China so that I can be able to create opportunities for you to be able to engage not only people in Johannesburg, but people in the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. So I did something very, very silly. I didn't tell you who I was. So my name is Tessa Dooms, and I'm the moderator for the session. I'm going to ask everybody to prepare themselves, because I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves as well in a second or two. Don't breathe so hard. Wow. That sigh came from deep inside. But I wear a few hats tonight. The one is that I'm the managing director of an organization called Youth Lab. So I work in the civic space, but I'm also a national planning commissioner responsible for youth development. And it's another hat that I hold important in this room because it's another avenue to get ways to engage with government effectively. So I'm going to, before we do a round of introductions for everybody else, I'm going to ask the Deputy Minister to also do his introductions and introduce his guests. And then we'll start this conversation. Before we do that, Deputy Minister, one more thing. Social media matters. So hashtag BackChat, capital B, capital C, is the hashtag for our conversation. And this is also going to be streamed on UJ online platform. And UJFM is also doing this live.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening. Well, firstly, my name is Buti Manamela. I'm Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, and welcome to BackChat. This is our 11th session. We have been having a lot of these sessions since, I think, 2014, if I'm not mistaken, discussing on a whole range of issues. And today, because we thought we are having this important discussion, we should have it hosted at the University of Johannesburg. And so Prof agreed to host us. And since he's also asked that we come here again, he will obviously make some other few concessions because your people were not kind enough to feed us and all of that, but we definitely know that when we come back, all of those things will be guaranteed. But into the discussions today, we had hoped to have the Minister of Public Service and Administration joining us today for this discussion. She was booked off until Tuesday because she has a bronchial infection. So she's off work. She really was looking forward to this. In fact, she's the one who asked that we have it here. I don't know why that she specifically chose this venue. So unfortunately, she she can't join us. And at the time she indicated that she's unable to come, she also tried her best to get other people to come through, but unfortunately, it was short notice, so we couldn't get anybody to take a space. But we have a commissioner from the Gender Commission here, Ms. Lula Manare, who's also very well conversant in the topic. But all of you who've been chosen to be part of this discussion are also well conversant with the topic. and I will be obviously taking the feedback to the Minister and some of my colleagues in government around the discussions and what came out of here. Now, what do we want to look at tonight? Women's Month has been, and importantly so, used to highlight in particular gender-based violence. And as part of the build-up and during Women's Month, you know, what takes the center stage is the issues around abuse. And that has been the central message sent out from government, from the private sector, from civil society, from individuals. Social media is dominated by all of these issues. And this is important because it has become a very serious problem in our society. One of the things that we're looking at higher education and training is developing and designing policies and framework that will guide our institutions to deal with the question of gender-based violence. Government has a plethora of interventions that are specifically focused on gender-based violence. And even then, you know, be it issues around lesbians, gays, queer, transgender, children abuse and all of that, we believe that there's still a lot more that needs to be done. But we thought that, you know, over and above that discussion, we think we're discussing the symptom of an underlying problem. Because issues around gender-based violence, issues around violence in general are issues that relate to power and power relations. And in society, power takes the form of class, it takes the form of race, it takes the form of gender, you know, and the state has a crucial role to play as a legislator, as an implementer, a policymaker, you know, and all of that in all those areas. And we thought that we, if we to move away from what is the symptom, what is, you know, the result being gender-based violence. So moving away from there, that we have to take a look at, you know, the class issues, the fact that, you know, the structure of the state post-1994, I always veer away from referring to it as the post-apartheid state because it still has features of apartheid. Now, the structure of the state post-1994, you know, has not really responded to the challenges around patriarchy, the domination of men in different sectors of our society, be it politics, be it public service, be it the economy, you know, you name them. And I thought that, you know, so our discussion should essentially be around that. What seemed to be the problem? And if we agree on what the problem is, what are the things that needs to be done in order to ensure that we raise issues around state transformation so that the state should be able to respond to what I refer to. They're historical challenges, but you know, for today I want to refer to them as contemporary challenges because they are manifested in the way in which our democracy has evolved. So what are the things that needs to be done in order for us to deal with the underlying issues around, you know, what is the profiled issue of Women's Month, which is gender-based violence. You know, we tend to ask, I mean, people are so, you know, 999, Arthur, there are issues around, you know, what's her name? Sisi says that she's been economically, physically, sexually abused and all of that, even before the actual incident. And people say, but why has she stayed? You know, so it's not about the violence, which is the outcome, but it's the question of power relations. What's the role of the state and all of that? So I thought that, that we need to look at, and the reason why I would ask Minister Dlodlo was, as Minister of Public Service and Administration, responsible for state capacity and state role, it will help us to get deeper into, despite all the attempts, what are the weaknesses, what are the challenges and all of that. Yes, there's a lot that, this government has done in order to deal with issues which ultimately are a reflection of where we are. But obviously, because the challenges still persist, it means that a lot more still need to be done. But it's not only about state transformation, it's also about transformation in general in society. And institutions that are enabled by the state. If you think about traditional institutions which generally embraced and all of that, and some sponsored by the state, and there's some form of state engagement, but some of those institutions still perpetuate issues of gender exploitation, women exploitation. You could talk about religious institutions, you could talk about some practices in the private sector, for instance. So all of those issues, and that's really where I would want us to, get our discussions rolling on. Yes, we have to, and we will, I know, talk about the statistics, the number of, lesbians who've been victims of corrective rape, or gays who've been abused in their communities, and so forth and so forth and so forth. But I think that, in focusing in that issue, I also want us to step back and look at what are the underlying issues and what is it that that needs to be done. I always get asked this question, and Prof even asked me the question later on. So, are we just talking? One, I think this kind of talking is some form of action, because it challenges, firstly, myself, being a deputy minister in government, about some of the things which I probably would be taking for granted because of the position of privilege that I occupy, and therefore get enlightened. Secondly, we always ensure that we take up the issues, with the comrades in government to say, look, there's this issue of concern, and all of that, whether we need a policy, whether we need to improve implementation on this or that area. So that's what, all the BackChats has been about in the past, and we hope that this one will also be no different around what we need to do in order to ensure that we effect transformation within the state so that it responds to the challenges, contemporary challenges, I refer to them, that faces women in general. Thanks.
Thank you, DM. I'm also going to ask another guest to introduce herself, Commissioner Manara. The Gender Commission is an important part of our state's institutions, and it's more now than ever, when we are having so many conversations about gender. Going beyond conversations means being able to understand what the function and the role of a Gender Commission in our society is, and how it sees its ability to respond. So I think it's great that the Gender Commission is represented. And so I'll just ask you to give some opening remarks before we start a broader conversation.
Thank you very much. Molweni. Thank you very much. You're looking very stressed. Is it gender violence that is making you stressed?
That's what happens when you have stress.
It's very stressful, Sometimes, Deputy Minister, sometimes myself I feel like if I had a padlock, I'll be better off, because I still want to walk the nights freely, go jog at night, because I don't have time during the day. But I always think, I just want to start with some information. So Deputy Minister, I met with a special envoy in the military this week, and this woman is working in the DRC, where where there is war. They are deployed there, so she's the only one who's a female. So she shared something that I thought it's quite innovative. It can help me jog at night. She's talking about a condom that has a laser. Why? Because they can be raped by the rebels. So the rebels come at night when they pass through the villages where there's war zones, and what they do, they rape the mother, the children, and if they can't, they stand on the queue, and if they cannot, they are 10. So if number 5 is waiting too long, they take the knife and just open up and then they will share the same experience because they are in a hurry. So this woman said, because I'm a woman in this, I have to protect myself at the end of the day. So they might capture me, and the first thing they want to do will be rape. So she wears this condom, this razor condom. So it raised the question for me whether I couldn't get access to this razor condom so that I can just, but she said that it is very uncomfortable. But it's an innovative idea that I thought Diepsloot, women in Alexander, because we have hotspots where women, it's like every hour there's something happening in Alexander, every hour there's something happening in Diepsloot, where we have populous areas. But there's something happening in areas, Ikagiso, where they actively kill, and watch LGBTIs as they kill them, women especially, who are lesbians. So it's such an interesting topic to have. What is government doing? But let's start back. I am Lula Manare, I'm from the Gender Commission. I'm the chairperson of the Gender Commission. The Gender Commission is a Chapter 9. My sisters are the Public Protector, Human Rights Commission, Public Service, and et cetera, We are many, PENSALB included, NYDA in another chapter. What we do, we are tasked to promote the attainment of gender equality in the country. And I must say that post-apartheid, these past years, there is a regression in terms of how we view women, how we protect women, how we retain women, and how we treat women in our spaces. And therefore, it's something that is disturbing to observe as the Chapter 9 and the Gender Commission in particular, that what is even worse now, even where you are, young intellectuals, you are still attacked by your counterparts who are males. And what is so bizarre, one guy was actually saying in one of our research that he stays with this woman because he needs somebody to cook for him and clean the clothes. And the other one said, I'm raping because I'm sexually frustrated. So within the campus. So this is probably what you know. And it would help today just to get a sense from you. What is your view on this issue? Gender violence is nothing else but a social construct. If you are socialized to be a male, everything must be done for you, you are the king. And then you have to build your castle, and this woman must work for you, cook, and women are actually socialized to cook, to clean the house, and the boys, they go outside and play. We call it networking when you are older, but they come in any day, any time of the night. The parents are more secure when the boys are playing outside, even at 1 p.m. But if it was to be a girl, the first experience is, why would you have a girl at 1 a.m. outside? What is she looking for? The other aspect is how we dress. Socialization says women must be, don't show everything. Keep some for, for your private. so that you can be more enticing when you don't show more skin. And if you show more skin, people ask you what were you wearing when something happened to you. You were probably looking for it. Now, if you can't cook, it's even worse. What our males in our rooms in the Gender Commission explain to us when they have beaten black and blue this woman, she's failing to do what I expect her to do. So it's all about the expectations of who women are and how they have been socialized, and therefore their responsibilities in this homemaking life. So the whole life of the family, and I hope that we will come to that discussion, the origins of the family in itself, that it becomes now very oppressive and it tempers on the power relations between males and females, because the family is built at the back of women, and it's something that we need to work at. So I'm hoping that we'll have an interesting debate. We do research, we do investigations, we do investigations that are anonymous. We do go to Equality Court. We do subpoena, the warrants were taken out of our powers. So we do subpoena for information. So if you have something that you want me to do for you, and this person doesn't want to give it to you, because I want to investigate what you're talking about, we are given powers to call that person under oath and subpoena that person to appear. So what I have seen as I close is that our males, protected by the departments, the state, men come, you are accused of sexual harassment, but when you come as a male, you come with the HOD and the state attorney. And the female who is complaining about sexual harassment is sitting there alone with an NGO that is an activist. So that is why we exist as a gender commission, to be able to be that lawyer for that person and actually, mitigate for her and stand for her. So that's why Chapter 9s exist. Thank you very much.
All right. We're actually going to go straight into the conversation, and you'll introduce yourselves when you speak, which is an incentive to speak. So you introduce yourself. And I just want to remind us that, as DM said at the beginning, we do want this conversation to not only be about the symptom of the way in which gender plays out, but also the reasons why it is that way. The state's function is to build an enabling environment for us to live in. And so if we have a gender-disparate society, a society where women and gender non-conforming people cannot live and be free and do the things they want to do, then the state's responsibility is to create that. And I think by the end of tonight, I hope we have suggestions for the state on how it can improve the enabling environment it has to create. So one of the first questions I'm going to throw into the room, and please also feel free to throw questions into the room. You don't only have to comment, you can ask questions. You don't even have to only ask questions to DM or the commissioner. You can ask questions to other people in the room. But I'm going to throw a question into the room and ask if you can think of a state function, or whether it's a Home Affairs office, any part of the state that you think doesn't work for gender rights, doesn't work for gender equality, doesn't work for the empowerment of women, and why it doesn't work and what you think could change. So I'll note hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's go.
Hello, Molweni, Lekai, all of it. I just want to quickly beforehand introduce myself. My name is Buti Manamela. I'm the communications manager for HE-AIDS, and I just want to point out our role as the Higher Education, Health, Wellness and Development Center. Mouthful, I know, and those are big things to actually do once you separate them. As students, you'll see that we actually work hand in hand with our implementing arm, as we are functioning as the implementing arm of DHET within the campus. So other things that you might want to raise about the particular facilities and things you have on campus in society that you'd like us to take note, please, we're here. And I'm here with our technical advisor as well, Managa Pillay, and one of our provincial coordinators, Shiba. But to your question, because I think it's a very interesting one, I think one of the practical ways in which government institutions can intervene is on the issue of economic empowerment. And one of the bedrocks of that keeps so many women in the symptoms that we outlined was where you live. Land becomes a huge thing. I'm from rural Eastern Cape. I can tell you now as an unmarried woman, to access land, to be able to have a place that's safe to call your own is absolutely impossible. More so if you're unmarried, more so if you do not have a child. So it means whenever you're going to have access to a place of safety, you need to go to brother or malume to go and speak to you, to Induna, who's going to tell you that so basically that means a chief that's going to say that they don't speak to women. And that is something I'm also going to urbanize, right? Because we love to focus on the rural question of land, of home, of shelter, but actually directly something that the Department of Higher Education can intervene in is the lived of vulnerable students right here on this campus, right? If you cannot get a scholarship that gives you access to a residence, if your parents don't have the money to support you in order for you to find rent, that is where we find a lot of students, a lot of women, incredibly vulnerable to many systems, be they gender-based violence, be it transactional relationships, simply because you need a place of safety. So I think that is definitely one of the clear ways in which government and the state can intervene to make sure that women not only have a place to stay, but for once actually have that title deed in their hand. People keep talking about the race nature of land ownership and land safety, but not the gendered nature of it.
Great. There was a second hand. There were hands on the side.
Hi.
There you are.
Yes, I'm Zizo Mabete. I'm a sound engineer, and I just wanted to point out on arts and culture, right? I realized that in SAMRO, a lot of female artists are not given the platform. And another thing is, in terms of your situation, I realized that companies need to subsidize their taxes for school fees. Instead of taking it straight to SARS, out of that 30%, at least 5% needs to come our way, so that women can be provided for and taken care of. I think that would be a solution, because SARS deals with other matters, but academically, every nation is held by its academics, right? So if we focus on that, for example, UJ, if all these hotel companies fund STH, for example, like 5%, I think out of those 5% coming collectively, it would help school fees become more affordable. If school fees cost like 50K, it could be made cheaper for like 30K or 25. And then that way, I think it'll help women and everybody, because women are more important than us here around the country, so we need to acknowledge that. And in terms of work ethics, a lot of women work harder than men. And I realized that the only way to end corruption is to have more women in the industry than men. I'm not trying to be biased or anything, but I realized that women put in more work. And that way it'll give people who are creatives a much more fair opportunity to build the economy as well.
I mean, an interesting thing about what you're saying, I think the gentleman is that I don't think that women necessarily just by nature work harder than men. I think women are forced to work harder than men, because if they don't work as hard, they're not going to even get a tenth of what the man is getting, or they're not going to get the space or the recognition. And I think that's part of the difficulty. We don't work hard because we want to, guys. We have to. I promise you, I'm very lazy, but you have to. Just to remind me, the other hand on the side was, there we go. All right, so you already got the mic. Yeah, and then we'll come to that.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thabo Lisore here. I'd like to make an input in relation to the work that is being expressed by the Chapter 9 institution. I think that there are Chapter 9 institutions, so that's the Gender Commission. I think there's a lot of space in the in the youth field to engage with what the work of the Gender Commission does. In speaking to finding like areas of address and synergy in terms of like sort of work streams, I think there's a lot of things that concern youth that I think fit into you guys' legislative mandate. So I would love to learn more about how you guys can get more involved in the youth issues in the creative industries that speaks to issues of empowerment, equality, and also labor market issues here. So I think just to hear from you guys was very encouraging today, and I would really like to learn more about the work you guys do. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you. Greetings and good evening, everyone. I am Sizopila Mkhize from the ANC Youth League. I just want to make just 2 points. Firstly, DM in the House, it's the issues that touches gender-based violence and women empowerment, as my sister said, which needs to be corrective measures for us to be able to deal with the inequality in gender. But I think first things first is to be able to educate our societies on what we mean when we speak about gender equality. Gender equality does not necessarily mean that one gender is superior than the other, because that has been the narrative out there. But amongst other things that I think, I understand this is higher education and training department, but I believe that the DM would have that opportunity to speak to other leaders of other departments as well. Because we're faced with a situation, more especially in villages where I come from. You're faced with a situation where young girls and young women are still turned away when they report cases of crimes which touches gender-based violence. They're still turned away, they're still mocked by the police. I think that anyone who's found doing that, because the people that do that in police stations, they are known, but there's nothing that is happening in making sure that those people are reprimanded if they need to. Another thing is the issue of women empowerment. When we speak about women empowerment, we've seen a recycling of same faces of women all over again. And there are a lot of women in our society that are much capable to be in business, be it in politics and everywhere else in the society, that can be able to contribute in the society. Now, when we speak about women empowerment, we're not necessarily speaking about the same faces all the time that we see either in government, in business, or wherever. We need to uplift those young women that are there so that we can be able to build a stronger and gender and a society that is equal when it comes to gender. Thank you.
I want to just latch onto something we said with the first speaker, a question about property rights in women. We had a discussion around gender and land a few weeks ago. And one of the other commissioners in the Planning Commission made the point that FICA and RICA are actually gender biased. Because if you don't have access to property, things are not in your name, that means your proof of residence isn't in your name. If your proof of residence isn't in your name, going to open a bank account, going to go and get a cell phone, you may have to ask your husband or a male or somebody else for those documents if land or property can't be in your name. And so there are certain policy decisions or policies that are out there that are not directly against women, but in small ways start to disadvantage women. And I wonder if in your experiences, you can think of those kinds of things as well, those kind of practical things that don't seem bad when you start off, but eventually you run up against it and you think, this is not working for me. The way in which crimes are reported, the fact that the majority of the police force is male, and when you get to a police station, you're encountering male bodies that may not be very caring or, understanding. So there are these kind of societal issues, and I'm just wondering if in the House there are more of those kinds of things. So I'm going to take more hands, more views. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go with those. 4. Great.
Hi, I'm Pearl Pillay from Youth Lab. I'm going to raise two points. The first, Tessa, you already kind of alluded to it and was alluded to earlier on, the South African Police Service. Just at the beginning of this month, we had a total shutdown. And firstly, the lack of support from both the Minister and the Presidency responsible for women, as well as the Gender Commission, is telling, right? So if you set up institutions that are meant to help and protect and be in solidarity with women, how is it that a country gets shut down and those institutions only just release statements, right? So when it comes to SAPS, women in this march were threatened with rape, people were beaten up, and that's going to go without consequence, right? So the hyper-militarization of our police service and their complete disregard for any kind of gender thought is something that really needs to be addressed. So the fact that police can walk around with live ammunition, kill students at TUT, I hope, because you're here, that the minister is at TUT dealing with that issue, because otherwise it's going to be a problem. But the fact that you have a police service that is inept at actually dealing with gender issues, people are raped and go to a police and get laughed at. So you have police that are inadequately trained, but are also hyper-militarized, so they cannot think outside of violence. And so how do you have a more sensitized police service, but also how do you almost de-escalate their affinity towards violence? Does it mean, why are police walking around with live ammunition, right? So how do you reform a police service that is so violent already, and especially then towards women? And the second thing for me is home affairs. So the gendered nature of home affairs, and so you were asking about the small policy things that happen. The fact that when a woman gets married, your surname is automatically changed is an administrative nightmare, because you have to go and pay money just to get your old surname back if you've decided to not change your surname. And there's a rule that you can fill in like a form to then stipulate that you don't want your surname changed. But unless you have someone who's going to nag the person at Home Affairs, they often just ignore it. And so what happens is you're trying to then go and do an adulting thing that requires you to present your ID, and your name next to your ID number is a completely different name. So now you have to go through an ineffective Home Affairs process just to get your identity back. So I think that's the one policy thing that kind of just gets overlooked. The last thing, because we're here with higher education and training, is how do universities become safer spaces for women? So Rhodes University comes up immediately as a kind of outlier where rapists are openly protected on that campus, and victims are the ones that are expelled or have to bear the consequences of what happened to them. And so how do you as a department become more responsive to women on campuses? The last thing, sorry, Chair. Sorry, excuse. And then I won't speak again, I promise. But it's also most comrades, you know, you have to conclude and then you have to pronounce and then you have to. So the last thing is, in thinking about the way we view innovation, particularly around rape, so I want to just respond to the condom example that you used. We still think about rape as an incident that only occurs at the point of penetration. So now that a woman has a certain condom that she can use, then suddenly that's supposed to help rape interventions. And that's not the case, because rape is an entire experience, not just at the point where a penis enters you. And so I think in thinking about what we view as innovative and what we view as solutions, to think about the fact that rape is not just a one-time event. It's something that occurs over a long period of time and something that lasts with a victim long afterwards. And so how do we think about interventions that take that into account rather than just like physical acts? Now I'm done.
All right, so I am going to ask people to try and keep yourselves, contained. I don't want to have to chase people, only because we have a limited time and I want as many voices in the room as possible, yeah?
Okay, I'm number 3. Should I proceed?
Oh, no, proceed. You've got a mic. No,
Okay.
no, just...
Okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lebo from UJ Community Engagement. I'm going to be as brief as possible. I think the first thing, the Ministry for Women and Children in South Africa needs to be more visible. And I'll tell you why. There needs to be a way for the ministry itself to do probably workshops or roadshows in schools and institutions of higher learning, every time there's something of a national interest in the media about a woman going through something, from my point of view, I stand to be corrected. Either the ministry is not visible at all, or unless civil society takes action, then you see a press release or a media release saying that this is an injustice act to women in South Africa, and therefore we will act. But when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, you never see the output of exactly what they have done with that issue. And I'll tell you a real story. So the student volunteer champions at UJ also volunteers at Diepsloot, Alex Avery Park, and other, unprivileged communities. And we had a case of a young learner that we're helping who was kidnapped on the weekend before Mandela Day, on a Sunday, found on Monday, raped, murdered, and mutilated. And there is nothing, and I'm sure the parents have, reported that issue. There is nothing that has been done to advocate enough rights for our children from these perpetrators. And if you look at the issue of cybersecurity for women in South Africa, intergenerational. There has been a video by BBC of a man admitting that he is a rapist and he stays at Diepsloot, and he was molested by cops when he was 15 years old. Therefore, he does not want to die alone, and he is untouchable. And for me to see a criminal investigator having a conversation with that man, and the video is trending, and there is no statement saying that we have captured this man. Obviously he was raped, which is a process. He need mind therapy, rehabilitation, and to be stopped. And that actually upsets me, because then it tells me that the Department of Education, when it comes to cybersecurity issues for women, also students in higher learning, they are not protected at all. Cyber sexting. We have cases of students who are saying, look, I just got an email saying that, I should come for an interview, but first I need to send a video of my body. Whether I'm voluptuous or not, probably I'll get the job. Why should we go to an extent where women have to document their bodies in order to be accepted in other industries? And I really think that there should be an act that prohibit either recruitment agencies or companies to stop or to underline how far can a prerequisite for a young woman or young man to go for an interview, whether they should show those photos. And we know that sometimes these recruitment agencies, our students are victims of probably, going to downtown Joburg, and that building is working with, in that building, there are syndicates that are working with human trafficking criminals, and therefore you get cases of missing students, and sometimes it has to be, for the sake of crisis management, do not announce this. We are dealing with this institutionally, and I'm sure the image of our country will be okay, so that we can build on the bilateral trade policies that we're just discussing with China, Russia, and so forth. And another thing that I wanted to add, and I'm sure we still have more time to talk about this. So Department of Labor. I think from my point of view, it's unproductivity versus employment. Fourth Industrial Revolution is a reality in South Africa. We have had our president saying that we're endorsing it and we cannot live in silos as South Africa. But have we done enough investigation for women to equally be favored when it comes to issues of innovativeness? Our women are innovative, they are creative, they are efficient, and they are also effective like men. But still, it's a silent conversation to say that as we enter into Fourth Industrial Revolution, we will make sure that 50-50 approach for productivity for our country to move forward, to be competitive with developed nations. This is what we want to do, and that is very close to my heart. In conclusion, Department of Higher Education and Training. So universities have, let's say, a third core pillar as community engagement. But I believe that we should have a policy from primary until university, where at least we have a curriculum compulsory for our young learners and for even us in society to do community engagement, civic engagement, or volunteerism. Other countries like Nigeria, graduates, they have to work in a government department before entering the corporate world. I think that will help us as South African to actually make sure that the world understand that we know an African philosophy of Ubuntu. We are teaching our children that you can be involved in the Sustainable Development Goals that our country have agreement with the United Nations. That is actually the easiest solution to integrate the 17 Sustainable Development Goals for our children and adults to be orientated about. Then land will not be an issue, because a young person can tell a chief that, give me land and let me show you how micro-enterprise, SME can grow for my village and how we can then have solar panels and so forth. And I'm telling you, start with Limpopo, it will work well. Thank you.
I agree.
I'm sorry, I was number 4.
Thanks. But I skipped her.
There was still number 2.
Allow the chair to lead. You will not be disappointed.
Program Director, thanks. My name is Pilile. It's a bit disappointing that Minister Dlodlo is not here. I was hoping she would be here, but it's understandable she's not well. The reason that I was hoping that she would be here is because I was hoping for the opportunity for us to really engage on what the Deputy Minister said is the question, what is the problem? And that is a policy question. Policies are determined by what the problem is defined to be, correct? So who defines what the problem is the one who makes the policy and the one who determines social order. The Minister of Public Service and Administration about 2 weeks ago came out of the Lekgotla and announced that there is a conceptual exercise to restructure the state. That means that, what that means is that the DPSA is looking at the 4th priority of the presidency, amongst others being land, poverty, the minimum wage, blah, blah. As it pertains to women, the question that is being asked is, how do we then reimagine the responsibility of the state towards women? That is what the problem is. Unfortunately, because the minister is not here, the kind of conversation we are having is not then centered or focused on what is happening in the state. What is currently happening in the state is that the state is currently rethinking or reimagining the structure of the state. And when it comes to the Department of Women, in order for us to understand where the state is going, we have to understand where it's coming from. I'm going to try to be a bit brief, but history is a very complicated thing. But it's incredibly important for us to understand what the problem is. So just bear with me. And I'm going to take it from, say, 1909, the establishment of South Africa as a state, when we put together these colonies. We have the South African state as it is. Then you have, when you look at how, because the question we are asking is, how do women engage with the state, and what is the responsibility of the state to women? So when we go back there and look at how women's movements were formed, the claims and interests that women demanded against the state. Initially, it was towards the vote. Women wanted to vote. And then around the 1913s, it was the issue of the passes. So it was in response to the state and the laws that the state made. However, and this is incredibly important, the difficulty that women found in forming a political base has been incredibly difficult because of the differences amongst women, be it class differences, race differences, ethnic differences. So you had differences amongst black and white in the same way that you had differences between British and the Boers because of the Anglo-Boer War, for example. Just stay with me. So that kind of messes up with the capacity of women to build some kind of solidarity to make claims against the state. So when you come to 1913 and women are marching in where is it, Bloemfontein or Kimberley? It is on the basis of race. It's an issue that they have, and it's a race issue, but it's a women's issue nonetheless. When you come to 1930 and the government of the day gives white women the right to vote, it's a racial issue once again. So throughout history you have this, and in 1956, which brings us here, you have women trying to forge some kind of solidarity, but it is a fractured solidarity and it breaks at around 1958. But a lot of things are also happening around that time, including, the Defiance campaign. It was the era of the Defiance campaign, and other things were happening politically. So you have that de-establishment of the women's movement. Silent 60s, then a lot of women moved, a lot of the activism, even anti-racism activism was in the trade unions. Then you move to the 1980s, where women, again, a lot of them are coming back from exile and they're trying to build this solidarity. This is the issue that we're still facing in 2018. As women do this, you still have this issue of class and race and ethnicity in 1983 when the UDF was formed. But now there's another dynamic, because you've had the international women's movement has had a big role to play in how we define what our claims are against the state. And this started in 1974 with the United Nations embargo. And of course then the role of United Nations women in apartheid politics. So a lot of the tensions you have around women's activism in the UDF is basically tensions around how do we define feminism. What is feminism? It's a white woman's thing. You think you're better because you think you're a feminist, blah, blah, blah. These are issues we still have today. There was also the issue of nationalism. And this is what we call a double militancy. I think the commissioner will most likely identify with this concept the most. The idea of the double militancy, which bothered women politicians in the majority, was how do we define ourselves? Are we fighting solely for women, or are we fighting to get women, to mobilize women into the ANC, for example, or the National Party? And there was a big problem because the ANC is patriarchal by nature, and not because it's the ANC, but because institutions are gendered, and we've been talking about this. So now when you have that double militancy and that double consciousness, you don't know which way to go. And you've got feminists outside of the state saying, you are a sellout, why are you not fighting for women? And you have these women saying, actually, we are trying. We are trying to do this inside the state, inside the movement, and we are trying to do it outside. Then they form a UDF Women's Congress. It dissipates within a few months. Sorry, yeah, I am. But this is incredibly important, and it can help us in the way that we articulate the kind of discussions that we do. So just bear with me. Then in the 1990s, these women moved from the UDF Women's Congress to what they called a Women's National Coalition. It is the Women's National Coalition that thought up the Gender Commission, for example. And what they thought of was a package of institutions, as they were thinking about how should the state respond to South African women. They said, well, the best thing to do is a package of institutions. You place the most important one, a policy coordinating institution, you place it in the presidency for that proximity to policy-making processes, but you also place it independently by establishing the CGE. You also place it in parliament, but you also place it outside the state in terms of civil society. So civil society is just as important as the Department of Women, for example, when you think of it conceptually. In order for this package to function correctly, you also have offices in premier's offices, gender focal points, blah, blah, blah. This is what Minister Dlodlo would have told us. Now, in order for this package to function properly, it has 3 conditions that are required. One, of course, is a rights-based sort of constitutional framework, which we have. And then 2, it's an increased number of women in decision-making positions, which we've tried to do with the 50-50 policies. But the third most fundamental one is healthy and feminist ally relations between the women who you've put in the state and the women who are outside the state. So when you have Commissioner Nare saying that actually we see women coming with women from civil society while the male perpetrators are coming with their heads of department, what that says It says a lot about issues of double militancy. It also says a lot about how the NGM is supposed to conceptually work. Now, the problem we have, now in closing, the problem we have is that this package of institution has had a problem with understanding what it's supposed to do. And the work that Minister Dlodlo right now is doing is trying to reconceptualize that issue. Some of the problems, there are other issues I would have wanted to engage with Minister Dlodlo, but while we have the CGE here, there are issues that we can speak to directly that relate to the CGE. For example, the CGE is established by Chapter 9 of the Constitution with other commission institutions. Yeah. All of these institutions except the CGE, all of their establishing acts, the legislative instruments that establish them, make provisions for the establishment of a fund so that the money that comes from National Treasury goes directly to that institution. The CGE is the only institution that has to get its money from the Department of Women, from Treasury to the Department of Women. That on its own says a lot about the patriarchal bias of the state. I mean, that's a problem we've had, and nobody's addressing it, and nobody can say why. What that does is sort of complicate the reporting structures of the CGE, the Department of Women, and also the relationship that the Auditor General and the Portfolio Committee would have with the CGE. Commissioner Nara is nodding because she's agreeing. However, you also have some incredibly good innovations in the CGE. And the reason that these innovations have come about is because of this role that is not being talked about, that the Portfolio Committee is playing. When there have been administrative challenges, and these administrative challenges, of course, will contribute to the performance challenges. When you have administrative challenges, the Portfolio Committee said to the CGE, report to us on a monthly basis. With that reporting on a monthly basis, the CGE was able, I think it reached 100% of some of its programs in the past financial year. And that is an incredible improvement because of the work of the CGE. And that is a theoretical, yes, just give me 1 moment, that's a theoretical issue. So when we ask what the problem is not specifically the police or the justice system. Yes, those problems are there, but those problems are not the problem. They are just results of the problem. And I'm encouraging this discussion to look at the problem with the relationship between women and the state as a problem of the national gender machinery. How do we reconceptualize the national gender machinery so that it changes these things? And at the core of it, of course, is feminist consciousness. If you don't have a feminist consciousness in these institutions, you're not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to do a quick ad break before we go to the next comment. My boss has been threatening me the whole time. Food is not for the end. Food is for whenever you feel like you want food. Drinks are not for the end. It's for whenever you want. And there's also wine. It's not for the end. It's for whenever you want. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Thanks.
Sir from UJFM. It's you.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Sandile Ntuli from UJFM. I'm going to speak to two issues that have been raised so far. I feel actually one hasn't been raised. I'll start this other side. I hope I remember your name, Pearl, I think you said. So Pearl raised, I think, a very pertinent question. And also Mam Nare as well touched on another issue. She spoke about, I think, sexual violence in war regions, I believe. There was a product many years ago. It was called Rape X. It was invented by a South African professor. And basically, this contraption was something that a woman would put inside her vagina. And when a man tries to rape her, it would open up, it would clamp health providers realized that I'm a bad writer. But then it dawned on me that perhaps it's not that I'm a bad writer, perhaps it's just that I'm a man, and perhaps the view is that because I'm a man, I should not be offering this solution. So now what I would like to do is, I would like to find out from the ladies around here, as men, how do we sort of get involved in this discussion of So we can't stop rape, but surely in some way we can try and prevent, basically, I don't know, how can I put it? We can try and prevent, we can try and make sure that these criminals, these men that rape, are somehow caught. I just want women's views on that, on such an innovation that was developed. That's one thing. And then another one speaks to legislation, which I've touched on. Now, this is a very tricky one. It's a very difficult one. I'm a man, so of course I don't know much about virginity testing. I do know that with the Reed dance, it's about virginity testing. And with virginity testing, what comes to mind is an older woman respected in the community who, I don't know, uses some implement or her fingers or whatever to probe a young woman's private parts to check for if she's still a virgin. You'll remember 2 years back, I think it was, there was also a bursary scheme for maidens. So if you can prove that you're still chaste, you're still a virgin, you will get this bursary still. I feel that is an act of sexual violence because against women and girls, it is part of tradition, but we don't question it. No one, it's either, there's this eerie silence in government, there's this eerie silence, maybe it's in the media, but I don't know. Why are we not asking this question in terms of our traditional beliefs? Why are girls still being put through virginity testing where strange women are probing their private parts? It should be illegal. There should be legislation against this. So I just would like feedback from both the men and the women here in terms of those two areas, rape acts, and the second point is the virginity testing of girls. Thank you.
All right, so I've noted 1, 2, 3, 4. You've already spoken, so can I ask you to hold up a little bit? 4, 5. So you can answer another 6. Okay, 6. So we take rounds. I just want to also note 2 comments that have been thrown to us as questions from the floor. The one is the question about the state machinery. And do we understand what state machinery is put in place in terms of gender equality? And do we know how it's supposed to operate or how we can insist on it operating better? And the second question about whose job is it to socialize society and conscientize us better? Who actually holds that? Is it anyone's job to do that right now? So I just want to throw that into the room so we all remember that we've been asked that. So I'll go 1 and then I'll note after that.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thapelo Kakazi from Valley University of Technology. Deputy Minister, this is to you. How do you bring about change, or how do you bring about decolonization and transformation in an environment that resists change? I'm saying this because in the higher education sector, we are mainly focused on teaching and learning. We forget the social aspects of students and youth at large. Even in the terms of leadership and management, like for an example at VUT, out of 4 deans, we only have 1 woman. Out of DVCs, we don't even have a woman, you see? So it goes to the level of management, commitment and responsibility. Who has to do it if it's not us? Issues of implementation, issues of support services. We do have policies, guidelines, Chapter 9 and all those, but they are not implemented. We just have them for formality. We have HIV and AIDS unit for formality because the guideline says each institution has to have a unit for HIV and AIDS. Who has to come with the initiative to implement? Whereas, let me say, the foot soldiers, when they speak, their voice is not heard. From the DHET, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Matapelo Kamata. I'm the Deputy Secretary General, SRC, from Tshwane North, TVET College. My issue is, I'm listening to everyone, and everyone is talking about SAPS maybe social development or whatever, the chiefs and stuff. But I think this also includes men also, young men. So my issues around TVET colleges being neglected, which worries young women that are studying in TVET colleges. They feel that they have to study at a university for them to be safe, which I think it starts there. It starts there when already I'm studying in an institution that the government is not taking really seriously. Then what happens when I leave this institution? It means that I'm gonna be living here thinking that I'm not well qualified. I have to go to a university, and if I can't go to a university, then I meet a CEO that says, open your legs and then I give you a job, then I'm gonna do it. So I think the government also has to work on focus also on the TVET colleges. This worries a lot of women, like a lot of women. Also, I feel that us as women, we do not respect each other. There's a lot of pull her down syndrome that is going around, and that destroys a lot of women. Just a simple compliment, okay, not actually a compliment. It's not a compliment. If I'm gonna tell you that you look good, but if you could have wear maybe a red color on your lipstick, you'd look beautiful. That already destroys women. So I think also we need to work on ourselves as well. And the Deputy Minister, I think on the issue of TVET colleges, I think you need to look at that, because also issues of NSFAS, the criteria that you use for universities, I feel that it needs to be used for TVET colleges to avoid a lot of things, so that young people do not have to go to give themselves to blessers, so that young women do not have to allow the boyfriend that she doesn't actually love, but because the boyfriend gives her money, buys her clothes, and pays for the transport. I think if you could look at that, it could minimize a lot of what's going around. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Good evening. I am Lazlo Pesheakoza. I am a student at the university down the road that was not mentioned by name. I am equally a youth activist and an intern at Youth Lab. And DM, I rise on a point basically with regards to violation. I think we need to deepen our conversations around violation and not only look at the physical impact of violation. I speak to the violation of the genuine human right against education, and that is what young pregnant girls on campuses are going through. They are, and I say this because I have dealt with several cases where students have been kicked out of res, students have been denied access to returning into the institution and continuing with their studies, given that they have proven that their responsibilities are taken care of and they ought to therefore continue with their future. Universities have barred young black women from continuing to access higher education, and that is extremely problematic. And two, I believe that the facilities on campus do not allow for young girls to come out about their situation, and there aren't facilities that assist women who fall pregnant within the space of higher learning. So in your office, I know that you have the powers and the capabilities to ensure that each and every campus in this country has one, support, and two, does not block young women from continuing their studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Vuyo Mhlakaza, Peace Member of the ANC in Gauteng. I appreciate the invite from the DHET. I was hoping to listen more to the young women in the room, and I was importantly touched by what Osisi said over there about the situation that happens in those populous areas that you work in and so on. But importantly, I want us to reflect what August means for us. Does August mean it's the only time we hold a gender commission accountable? Does it mean those sisterhood clubs that we have throughout the time or throughout the year, it's the only time we come here, sing kumbaya? Is it the only time really we ask government and their departments that have got gender units and women departments and so forth and so forth? And yet, remember, these violations happen every day. They're not an event that happened in August. What does August mean? To some, it's a remembrance of this, that, and the other. A loved one, maybe from the LGBTI community. Those who've passed on because of their stance or orientation. Others were commemorating a woman's month, commemorating the March, 1956 March. It's an anniversary, if Mama Sisulu, for instance, would have been 100 if she was still alive. So it brings a whole lot of, it's an emotive month, really, brings a whole lot of emotions depending which section of society or which community do you come from. In the LGBTI, it means something else. In the political circles or environment, it would mean something else, a commemoration of this, it's a celebration of that, and so forth and so forth. To the ordinary folk, what does it mean? It's panic and fear every day, locking your door every day. You can't walk down the street, and so forth. The woman in the war zone, every day, I can imagine the uncomfortable. If a tampon is uncomfortable, so I can imagine what that means. Is it the only time we then say, Comrade Ulama, can you tell us where are you situated? Where are you, comrades? Which office are you at? Can these people who do groundwork be some sort of support for yourselves? And are you able really, do you sit there wherever you sit? Are you allowed, or is there space, or do you want to even go to the ground and work with these various? So I'm just saying, it gave me some opportunity. This session gave me an opportunity to reflect that, August doesn't mean the same thing. Because as women, of course, we are not homogeneous. We are from all different corners. And your race, your class will always influence how you see it. But the last thing, we are agents of patriarchy ourselves as well. We're the ones who are in the front line. Who does this? Uputi was speaking about Uklola. Who does those things? It's not males. Abomama bendawo, isn't it? And they're firm on the issue. You can't do anything. In fact, there's rewards for you to be going through that. If a gynae is invasive, imagine a gynae who must do work on you, to cure you or whatever it is. Imagine what that process, that really, their value, its value are yet to be told, except for the fact that some cultural, inspired by patriarchy, really. You are a virgin for who? Who must see you as a virgin? Who must get inspiration and satisfaction out of you being a virgin? We're not able to be told when men will be tested for their virginity. Except that those who go for initiation school go to the mountain, and that's what happens there, sits there. As an activist, I can't speak on those because patriarchy dictates that as a female I can't, and all that and all that. So it means if I don't want to fight with my male counterparts, my male comrades, I must respect that. So that's the other inconsistency. I mean, you're activists, you must speak about anything under the sun, but the very same males they are with, no, stay out of that one. So how do you navigate that space? She says, I'm lazy, so I don't, this thing of doing extra work. It's even painful when you're black. You're a woman who you must work thrice. When you are black, you must work 6 times. So really, kunzima, you have to do all this. It's a daily struggle. These opportunities are good and well, colleagues, but it must make you reflect and think about the ordinary folk, who is heading a child who's either heading a home or a woman must sit there with 7 kids, doesn't work, and all these other things for her, these things we're saying, they have no meaning to her, this empowerment, this gender, because she, in her immediate, she must deal with economic issues for her to survive, such that in the 7 children, there must be one who must be married off at 15 to the chief or the older rich man in the area so that we're able to eat. So sometimes all these things, in the midst of us being agents of patriarchy, I mean, in congresses, we are the one who's used to fight other females. When males won't come in the fore to fight you, they send you to go and come for her. You are the one who is undressing on Facebook or all these other places, or even in Congress, in plenary. You say all those things. In your community or with your in-laws, you are the first one to come for the makoti, or vice versa, So we are also part of all these things and so on. So I just thought, let's also reflect on those. Thank you, Chair.
And then,
Sanmanan?
yep.
Okay, so my point is really on a solution on all the topics that I've had. So, as for me, I really love to read books. Every book that I meet, I read it. So I've been reading most of the magazines and newspapers. So I've really seen, you are aware that in newspapers and publication are a form of cultural learning. They really influence our behavior. So on that analytical that I was analyzing, so I've really tend to see what can I say? There is no accommodation of women within the publications, academically and also in the media. So if you're gonna check on most books academically, the only philosophists and people that you hear about are mostly males. Mostly males are once heard of a female scientist at the University of Zululand. It was once, and it was done. That was it. And also the reputation, the image of women, it's very portrayed as vulnerable in most cases within the media. Because every time you're looking at media, there's a woman being raped. There's a woman being done this, and all that can be interpreted in another way on somebody else. So I think that also provoke the violence against women because their image is really put in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, women are vulnerable victims. They're not just citizens that do what they do. Yep.
Hi, I'm Bontle Mokaleng. I might be unpopular for saying what I'm about to say, but I think we need to look at churches. There's nothing wrong with churches, but I have a concern that churches are unregulated. By virtue of you being a church, you can do as you please, because we assume it's a place of safety. The doctrines, which are also, are being dictated, simply because it's a doctrine, you can't necessarily question it. I know someone who was raped. She fell pregnant. She was old enough to make a decision of either, she was considering abortion, and the church therefore said you cannot. And now she has a child whom, as the child grows, she says the pain grows with the child, because every time when she looks at the child this is how old this rape is, this is the rape. And it then becomes a generational thing, because this child, she is rape. And, it's now a girl. But had she had given an opportunity, a human right opportunity, she could have opted for abortion if she wanted to. But because it is not godly, therefore, so she lives with pain on a daily basis. And the churches that we also see whereby you need to undress in front of your pastor, you haven't seen them? And in front of everyone, you undress in front of everyone, and the pastor will do as he pleases, and as in literally, and churches are very influential, DM, very, very influential. I used to serve in a church whereby we would have around 15,000 congregants. On a normal Sunday, it's not a special occasion. And I know how influential churches are. And for the mere fact that churches are not regulated, I can open a church today. I get free taxes because I'm a church. I don't have to pay the rates that you guys pay for electricity because I'm a church. I don't have to pay the other taxes that people pay. There's a number of benefits that come with churches. Hence, we have so many churches. How can we How can we ensure that churches are regulated? How can we ensure that there are certain human rights factors which are instilled that churches need to know you have to abide by these rules? Yes, you'll have your own doctrines. However, the government need to enforce certain rules that the church, standard rules, that if you are a registered church, you have to at least follow these. I think that's a bit of a solution, don't you think?
Please pass the mic down over here.
Hi everyone, I'm Ayanda Mubima. I am an attorney at Dlamini Attorneys. I must say I'm actually quite grateful for this opportunity to join such a forum, because I think it is about time that we speak honestly and openly about these kind of issues. First and foremost, I think it's extremely disheartening that at the start of any conversation when it comes to gender and females, we are constantly having to discuss safety and how we have to, fortify ourselves. And in my mind, it actually does not progress society, it does not progress the economy if we're spending all our energy looking at how do we keep, our population safe, just females safe. If you're spending all your time just working out how do I keep myself safe, you're not actually contributing meaningfully to the economy or to issues. So it's not to say that that's not important, and it's vitally important, but we need to start changing that, the whole narrative. That aside, I work in the legal field, and I've been lucky enough to be involved in employment equity, in the Employment Equity Forum. And for those who may not know, and for the students who will be entering the workplace, there's a forum in most companies where it's the Employment Equity Forum, where they deal with things around demographics, ensuring that the company has reflects the demographics of the country. More often than not, they do not reflect the demographics. And so as part of trying to ensure that, or to at least remedy those disparities, the company has an obligation to put together what is known as an employment equity plan. And this is essentially a list of their aspirations on how they're going to address the issue, attract more black talent in management and throughout the firm, or in my case, a firm. And obviously just, like I said, to reflect the demographics of the country within the organization. And this is essentially their wish list and how they're going to go about doing this. What I have experienced is that because the way the labor law is structured and the requirements for putting together such a plan, it's just a wish list. There's no real consequences to not complying with it. So they can decide that over a 3-year period, this is what they're going to do to try and remedy the demographic issue. And if they fail to do so, oh, well, we'll try again in the next 3 years or next 5 years. All that time, you've got, black talent, female black talent that are coming into these organizations and are, going nowhere. So my view is that there needs to be more stringent consequences for failing to comply with your plan, bearing in mind that these are organizations that understand their fields. They understand the issues. They understand the demographics. They are doing business in South Africa, so clearly they understand the issues. And this is a plan that they developed themselves. It's not imposed by government other than to say, put together a plan. So they can't argue that, well, organizationally we can't comply. They can because they've thought of the solutions. But unfortunately, because the consequence of non-compliance is try again, that needs to change, and it's been going on for way too long. So I'm of the view that we can use that forum, or at least that platform, to insist that females get recognized, that people of color are properly empowered. The last point I have relates to also, like I said, I'm in the legal field. So we do find a lot of candidates graduating from universities and coming into these organizations, and they sit for 2 years, because you have 2 years of candidacy, sit and do photocopies. They don't actually get trained. And only if a client insists on seeing a black face in the room will they be brought to the fore, but only because the client has insisted on seeing a black face. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they get any kind of exposure or any meaningful training. And I'm saying government has a role in that, to play in there. That as a client, they can insist that not only do you see a female face in the room, but you instruct that female face that they have a voice, that they are actually doing the work. So I think a lot more can be done in not just the legal field, because it's easy to speak to it, I'm in the field. It can be done across many fields.
Actually reminds me of the case of the Psycha CEO, whose gender views were just outlandishly primitive, manglingly. And it was just kind of like, okay, he said sorry, the board's okay, and there's absolutely no consequence to the fact that you're being led in an organization by somebody who doesn't care about equality. It cannot go unchecked. So I'm going to take a last round. I shouldn't have said last round, because now I'm going to have 44 hands. So I'm going to try and take a round of hands that I haven't had, and if I have time, I'm going to push. But now I'm going to put you under pressure. I'm going to put you under kind of 30 seconds to 1 minute kind of pressure. Simply because I want to get as many as possible. Your people already have mics. I haven't even noted hands. Wow. So I am going to note you. I'm going to note you, the gentleman who had the mic before the round started. I will note you, and I'll note the two ladies here, and then I'm going to close because it's already a lot of people. And you guys had no, but you should have done the poll. You should have just sped through all of it. All right. At the end.
So my name is Vinoba Krishna. I'm from one of the universities around you as well. But let me just say. So let me just say, just a quick kind of point. What I do think, and that's working on the ground, is that we need to establish platforms in which we get people talking. That for me is paramount in terms of how we deal with issues. You know, we talk about support groups or whatever, but people sharing their ideas, but also role modeling behavior. And I believe, and I'm a strong protagonist for that, is to get males talking about reshaping, re-socializing, rethinking, reinventing the way we behave as masculine males. And I do see the DM here, and I do know that HE-AIDS has a particular focus on that. But I do think conversations need to take place, and with a particular focus on males as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mararo Buti Manamela, and I'm a survivor of gender-based violence and a student from University of Technology. I think the last time he broke the ice by saying, sure. So instead of saying hello, everyone, and making it formal, we should just say sure, fair day, you know, so that we understand the level that we're at. Plus, I see there's wine, so maybe we should have started by toasting, and then everybody would be more chilled. But anyway, mine was to come on an institutional side and not really go into community politics and so on and so forth, because we are in institutions of higher learning, and DHEADS and everyone else are supposed to be speaking on institutional basis. So mine was to just say, we need to make a realization that gender-based violence is killing our youth faster than HIV and AIDS. And that needs to become like a conversation that we have every day, that supplying condoms is helping the other situation, but there needs to be a cure of gender-based violence, which means that there needs to be departments within institutions of higher learning. We need to have departments like the HE-AIDS, like the HIV unit, like the clinic, like the SSS that speaks only on gender-based violence, because I'm not going to go to a person that's just doing their job because they want a salary at the end of the day, but I want to go to somebody that has been, who has the experience of rape and who has the experience of gender-based violence. Because it's one thing to blame the SAPS, but when we now sit down and think, our institutions do it as well. When you go and you report a case of rape, they'll ask you why you were walking around campus at 2 a.m. When you go and you report a boyfriend beating you, they'll ask you why you even in a fat and sit situation in varsity. So I think we need to have peers and students that are not only just there for studying, but are survivors of gender-based violence, have been through gender-based violence, and are willing to assist other students. The problem is we do not talk about our experiences, and therefore we cannot assist each other. So I think by creating platforms like this, also have platforms like this that include students and not just higher students or political parties or leaders or activists. Let's have general students, and by having, I think we had our own gender-based activation, and somebody came up and spoke about rape right there and then. And this is, I think also in TNC, people came out and spoke about rape. So maybe if we start having conversations with our own like peers and other colleagues from our own classmates and so on and so forth, we could start awakening a conversation where students come up with their own solutions to say, look, I want you to solve gender-based violence like this, because you cannot come and implement gender-based violence solutions to me when you do not know me, or you do not know what I've been through. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna push for the 1 minute rule.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bernard Mashilwani Meya, a student here at UJ and also the chairman of SASCO at this particular campus. So the issue which I wanted to focus on, it was the issue of leadership, women in leadership, based on the organizations which we find ourselves in, which exist in society, and also in governance of high institutions of learning. Because I remember last year when we deployed a woman to actually become the chairperson of the SRC, we were told by some people that we were actually going to allow to take a mandate from a woman, which didn't sit very well with us. And we find that in this particular society which we live in the use of saying empowering women, men will have a caucus on their side and then come back and give women positions of deputizing. And then they say, this is a women's month, so therefore we're empowering you to give you power. But then giving them power only in deputizing them. And then we also have to look in what has happened partly into history. Why we say we actually need women in leadership, actually occupying positions which are occupied by men. Most of all the battles which have been happening in this world were actually created by men, because men, once they occupy these positions, they actually turn it into displaying power, who has most of the power in our society. They don't come with helping the world to actually develop and becoming a peace world. So we need to actually focus on that issue, and then women not accepting this thing of deputizing, because it's not working for all of us. So we need to look into it. Also, the Deputy Minister must also look into this thing of deployment of SRC, that at least we must say 50-50. Men must take 5 positions, and also women must take 5 positions. And then they'll discuss themselves on how they can actually move on upon with it. That's where we're actually standing. I can see to show me 30 seconds, but for now, I'll just submit from there. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Norma. I'm part of the SASCO member. I'm a SASCO member. I'm aware that more than 45% of women on campus are mothers, and 40% of those women are mothers are women of color. So as a innovation, I was wondering, why can't we have childcare on campus to make those mothers competent with other students, making it easier for them to cross nights at night and be able to study, as they're also expected to be successful in life and be breadwinners as they're taken back to universities at home. So I was wondering, can it be an innovation? So I'm speaking from a very personal point, whereas it's not easy for me as a mother to come and be here the whole night, transport and all those sort of things, and my safety as well. So I was wondering, why can't we have childcare on campus as an initiative?
It would help staff as well. I used to be a staff member here, but I wasn't a mother. All right, last 2 points.
Hi everyone, my name is Tutuzile Mazivuko. I'm a statistician from Stats SA. I just want to talk about what has been troubling us a lot as young women in the public sector. Currently we have women, like women in the, I am a majority in the especially in my department, yet many of them are in junior positions. We are talking of women in top management being at 22% and in senior levels being at 33.3%. And currently we've had these budget cuts, which is affecting mostly the recruitments, like there are no recruitment at all. So what is the government have in plan in changing the picture that we are having currently? Because there are no appointments. It's been 2 years already, and we are told that this is going to be the situation for the next 2 or 3 financial years. So what is it that are having in plan to change that picture? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, DM. Yeah, he said morning when he came in. So my name is Pearl Twanamatie. I am also a statistician. Thank you so much for an opportunity that you have given to us to be here today. Mine is, I've got two. I hope my 1 minute will be enough. The first one is the fourth industrial revolution. Unfortunately, the guy went to China. The professor went to China. I wanted to ask him a few questions regarding that. This monster is real. The fourth industrial revolution is real, and it's currently happening. I have been to 2 stores already, McDonald's and Spar. It's happening. Guys, there are no cashiers, and who's affected the most is the women. If you go to most shops, cashiers and your front people are your females. Now, when you have to go to McDonald's and you have to serve yourself by using that machine, 4 jobs are cut already. So what's supposed to happen to those women? Unfortunately, that's the reality that we are facing. And now coming to the state, we are saying, as SSA, if you know the history of states, we used to use paper a lot, questionnaires. We have field workers, your data collectors. They used to compile questionnaires, and they will come to your house and ask you all these questions. Now they use your tablets to do that. Once they come to your place, they capture everything on their tablet, they press send, it goes straight to the analyst. Now, there are about 250 people who will be rendered redundant. So far, as I'm speaking to you now, I'm a shop steward, ne? I'm a home member. I'm a secretary of the branch. So we are fighting with management a lot regarding this, because we have about 50 district workers who used to be your data capturers. 90% of those people are women. They now go to work, they put on their nice clothes, their lipsticks, they just fold their arms because there's nothing for them to do because of this monster called Fourth Industrial Revolution. Our country is becoming China. Technology is here. We cannot run away from it. It's a reality. It's here. But now, what is it that the government can help in giving more skills to those people? Because we are unskilled. We are saying we are in a school now currently. Most of you here are students. You are about to enter workplaces. But is there work for you? Thank you.
All right. So in my position as the chair, I'm going to allow 3 more inputs into this. No, not from the floor. Wait, you must listen to the words. Come on. The inputs are going to come from the listening ears who came here to hear what we have to say. And actually, you're one of the listening ears, so I'm going to include you in my roundup. So I'll start there, and then Nare, and then I'll end with DM, just with concluding remarks based on what you've heard.
Chair, thanks. I needed to ask this question. It just came when you guys are speaking here. Why is Umhlanga supported, sanctioned, and all that? You're practically naked. It doesn't incite or inspire rape and violence. Yet your short skirt or your Bermuda, your short, your tight pants is a reason enough for you to be, just as you walk down the street at 10 p.m. alone. It's a reason for you to be raped. It just came to mind that, so this thing, when we're told that, when you go to the police station, you're asked what were you wearing. Those who are not wearing anything, we don't hear stories, maybe they do happen.
but it's not as prevalent in safe spaces like this. Why in a city? Why surrounded by what you would say, everything else that must protect you? So it just came to mind, we must reflect as we fight. We must then expose these consistencies in society, because those who support and go and oogle there, the read dance and all, enjoy it, are the very same ones when you pass by North or Brie, are the ones who don't understand why you're wearing a short skirt. That's just what is an inconsistent. I needed to say this. Secondly, colleagues, I know we want to hold government accountable and so on. Just go countries, if you're well-traveled or you've got the opportunity, go up north in Africa. They do not have these institutions that we have. I know we feel government must be accountable, and they're not doing us a favor. And thank you for you guys availing yourselves to us on the ground. We can now have some form of relations. But those who are raped there in those war zones don't even know that there is a gender commission. What is even gender? What is a commission? Why does it even exist? Because they are always on the move. They live a nomadic life. It's children at the back to here, and all that and all that. There's rebels coming. It's just a cycle, a roller coaster. So I'm saying these institutions that are created, we must be very grateful to be here in South Africa. But of course, with the issues of land coming, maybe we'll not be as grateful, because there's going to be a lot of commotion happening. But we must be very grateful for these institutions. And of course, we'll hold you accountable. And colleagues, let's not complain. Next time again, we've got relations we've established with some of these things. And we thank you very much for that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Ms. Mhlakaza. I just wanted to demystify this thing. I don't like fighting. But the activism in me says I must fight back. To the shutdown activist in the room, the Gender Commission was marching. We have a banner. Maybe I should circulate it so that you can see how present we were. In fact, my offices around the country were closed. Everyone was in the shutdown. And everyone was also in the shutdown that was going towards Luthuli House, because it's women's solidarity. So it's a myth that the Gender Commission was not there. Second one that I think I want to come back to, religion. I want also, at some point, I think the Deputy Ministers talked about race, class, and gender, and Usisi, beautifully they put the ethnicity card on the table. And always statistics, this one is what triggered it. It's so interesting how overstudied African, Black African in particular. We are so overstudied, because the field workers, they come to our yards, we say, Sawubona kunjani, you know, we sit down and we talk. There are others of us here who stay in high walls. They never get researched for anything, but they are activists. We don't know what is happening in their communities, specifically white, our Indian community, we don't know anything about them. They are in high walls, and they don't talk that much about what is happening in their walls. They don't talk much about their religion itself. Hindu, what happens when you are not a virgin at marriage? We don't talk about that. Islam, when you get married and you are the 5th wife, just like Zuma had 4 wives, we don't talk about that. But if Zuma, a black person, has 5 wives, it's a big deal. Islam, men have 4 wives, and they battle for inheritance. So I think that at some point, as young people, now that we are all here, please make sure that your feminism takes care of race, class, gender, and ethnic issues. As an activist, I feel strongly that we should ground ourselves around that. Feminism has many waves. There is the bra ones, braless ones, who go, you know, I won't wear a bra, Judy Malquini. And then there are other ones who know that you are African, I'm black. Where I stay, my brothers have to do something with me for my culture. And it's like they have to speak sometimes on my behalf. Initiation for my boy will be done by my brothers. So what kind of a feminist am I going to be there in that space? So I think that ground your feminism, and as you grow up, it's going to fluctuate, I can tell you that much. Because it's going to be like this, and it comes back, and it goes up. Let me talk to the condom issue with the razor, why I raised it. It is a workplace issue. That woman who's wearing that condom with a razor is a South African woman who has chosen to be a soldier in South Africa. So she is deployed in a war zone area. So if we're talking about rape, and thank you for your courageousness, we're also talking about rape in the workplace as a particular hazard as you are doing your work. So these women soldiers, South African women soldiers, are deployed in the war zones. This is their passion. They want to be there in that space. They want to be in that occupation. And therefore, for them to be safe, they have to wear the razor condom. It's part of the, reasonable accommodation for them in the workplace. Another powerful thing that you have just given, I didn't know that, I didn't notice, and I think for me, thank you for enlightening me. Young women in higher education, young babies, women who are pregnant. I always assume that, why wouldn't it be? Why should it be, as you are saying? Why should it not be as progressive as you want it to be? I'm taken aback because high schools have moved on. If back then, when I was a teacher, if a child is pregnant, I can't fire the child. She must come back and write her exams. I'm here. So with young people, they give birth, and tomorrow they are here. Mistress, I'm here. I'm going to class. I'm writing my exams. So I think that it's an area of struggle, and I think that even for myself, it was a blind spot. So we will look into it. There's so much that you have talked about, and I'm just thinking that there is a church that is called Mboro. Now, this church touches the woman's clitoris until the women are infertile, and therefore they are going to be preyed on, and women themselves voluntarily go in front to the pastor, and then what the pastor does. And I was fortunate, Deputy Minister, he came to, he passed there. He passed there by my office one time, and I said, oh, you are the one that I've been subpoenaing. I've been looking for you, actually. So this guy will pray for you and touches the vagina, and then the woman cries, ne? And then everyone says, hallelujah, clap hands. And I'm saying, no, actually, this woman is reaching certain levels of being touched, And the church thinks that it's healing. Whilst the woman is being touched at a sensitive area, that will create some sensations, and the church is clapping in full swing that the person is healed. And, so it's things that are happening, but I want to tell you that it happens across races. The churches across races. Here in South Africa, women are being abducted, even white men who are getting married to 14-year-olds in cults. So it's not the Dutwa blacks who are cults. Whites in South Africa have cults. So our feminists must be very grounded when they are talking about. So thank you very much. Lastly, the role of men. There's a film called Inxeba that caused a lot of rumblings. So somebody asked me, the Gender Commission, what is your stance on Inxeba? The chairperson of the Gender Commission is a female. So I quickly went to do a research and I asked somebody I know, somebody around me, just like the university around here. And there are two people who are close to me, and I asked, this circumcision thing, do I have to make any comment on this? And this young male says to me, it's my brother. He said, the only thing that is wrong with Ingleba is just giving the names, the secret names that are used during the rituals there. The other things that are around there, but also there's no sex taking place in there, that is allowed because you have to heal. But then he starts breaking it down because he's male, and he says, the other thing that Ingleba does is to address the pain that young males experience during circumcision and how they are treated during their time there, and the things that happen there. Some of them get killed inside there, and what they watch as men, and what it means for them when they come back to their mothers. Their mothers are given a name. In Xhosa, you are called Isqwat. So all of a sudden, they must be resistant to the mother. The mother now becomes the minor. The sisters become the minor. So when they come back, we are all minors all of a sudden. So it's something that we should, I agree with you, young males, we should create the platform for males to talk also and have a discussion like this, where it's only males who are talking, because they are silenced by patriarchy. I know that you think patriarchy is actually more against women. Men also are silenced by patriarchy. They don't talk much because they are both beneficiaries and victims, but it's another feminist discussion that we will have. Our offices are here at Constitution Hill. We do awareness programs, but because of how we are established, we cannot have so much interaction with and bring other people into the institution. So we are highly regulated. We are highly guarded as to which NGOs we work with. As a result, sometimes we are called to order if we're working with certain NGOs, or if we're funded, the funding has to come straight from government. And if we have external funding, it's highly examinable. So it's a contested terrain. So, but we do go to communities. You can write and request for us to go to a populace, a Diepsloot, we go to Alexander, we have workshops. We also do the investigations anonymously, so you can still report anonymously and we follow it through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to be very, very brief. Okay. I think the question of land was the first issue that was raised, and probably rightly so. And I think it's going to be important that with all the processes that are happening, the parliamentary hearings and all of that, I think the point around ownership and the patriarchal nature of ownership of land, be it productive land, be it property for residential purposes and all of that. I think those issues need to be raised quite sharply. The FICA issues that RICA and all of that you were raising, I think those are some of the issues that need to be raised, in terms of policy. And also in terms of policy, I think it's the issues that are happening on our campuses. We have, with higher education aides, been working on a framework to deal with issues around gender-based violence, and we are hoping that before the end of the year that policy framework will be launched and will become a guide for all our universities, University of Technology and TVET colleges to implement, and we'll obviously give them the support for them to be able to do so. Now, there are issues around traditions, culture, religion, which are a manifestation of the patriarchal nature of our society. It also goes into issues of leadership. It also goes into issues of state structure and the responsiveness of the state. And I think those issues have been, here dealt with quite sufficiently, which was essentially the intention. And I think it's about not only about how do we influence policy. There is the Commission on Religious Affairs, and there's some hearings that are being conducted around some of the religious malpractices that are happening, and some of those issues are being raised. It was prompted, interestingly, by a different incident where some young pastor who was spraying people with doom and all of that. But I think all of those issues around, patriarchy, gender-based violence, and all of that need to be raised, because the intention ultimately is to regulate what happens in churches. And I mean, the danger is that it seemed to be more going towards the financial issues, tax and wara. But the practices themselves in the name of religion, which are essentially, anti-women and all of that, I think, we really need to be, to be raising that. But what I'm taking away is that there are, beyond policy issues, there are issues around social relations. The state, as the most powerful institution in our society, the highest form of concentration of power in a society, is a reflection of generally what happens in our society. If it's, some chief who's a member of parliament who's making the law, those laws will reflect, their prejudices and their biases and their protection of power and power relations, and then it will reproduce itself into different forms. And I think it's about how do we engage with, deal with that, challenge that, raise voices, in order for change to be effected, not in terms of policies, but also in terms of action. So I think it's quite crucial. Yes, there's been progress that has been made. I mean, we need to underline that. And I think there was a comrade who was Pelil, I think she said, who was tracing the history of gender struggles and the relationship of women to the state. And I thought she did quite a good job in also telling us what the minister would have said. But I think those are important issues that we shouldn't have an oversight on, because they trace where we come from and the progress that has been made. But what we are now saying is what more needs to be done. And maybe just as a final point, the issues around higher education, I don't think we need regulations from the ministry or department to say SRCs must be 50-50. It's even much better if it comes from students in the constitutional making process. You say, look, so that it becomes organic, it becomes student-led. It's not imposed by Minister Pando from the department. We are, for the last 5 to 10 years, have been turning the tide as it relates to TVET colleges. A lot of resources are being invested in there, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security, but also in terms of improving the quality of our TVET colleges. The numbers are increasing quite drastically. We're getting more people. In fact, if I get to talk about what the work we're doing in TVET colleges, in fact, we will not end. Exactly. So the water will become warmer. So there's a lot of work that we're doing, in that area, and I think that we need to acknowledge that progress, but constantly be reminded that we need to do much more as it relates to that. But other than that, I think the challenge with us, obviously, is how do we take all of these things forward? Importantly, I think it's about where we are, where we're located. You in the law, as a lawyer, for instance, there are students, there's the comrades from Youth Lab, there's SASCO, there's, and I think it's about what we do within the spaces which we occupy. That's important, so that we don't relegate deputy positions to women. So it's about those spaces, and I think that's important, that we raise our voices within those spaces. And secondly, to continue to raise our voices around, what more can institutions such as Home Affairs or the police or the Gender Commission or, all of the state institutions, what more can they do in order to ensure that, the state ultimately transforms in the manner in which it deals with issues around, women. Finally, I think it's around the Women's Month and what Women's Month means. Someone said the default position is to speak about security. Women's security, are women safe? And it's a natural instinct because that's the issue that preoccupies women in general, and innovations that do not seek to deal with the behavior of men, but to strengthen how women need to be protected. All of those things, it becomes a default position. But I think what this discussion was able to help us is, beyond that, what are the underlying issues and how do we take those forward? And I'm quite happy with, this discussion. It was quite exciting. And just like the chair of the Gender Commission, I also have taken a lot of things from here, which I'll also share with my colleagues. So thank you very much for this exciting engagement.
I'm going to use my privilege as the chair to throw one more in, to say, DM, Chair of the Gender Commission, we are tired of tea parties, please. Please tell government to lead the way, that August must not be about tea parties, frilly events, gala dinners. Can we have substantive, real things put on the table and change? Because if I have another tea party invitation, I'm going to cry. It really has to be a deeper space. And while I agree that every day needs to be an opportunity to speak about these things, the fact that we have August, let's use it to its maximum to do as much damage to the systems that oppress women as possible and not let it be commercialized and turned into Christmas ever again. I want to thank everyone in the room for participating. Food is being ate and continue to do so. And I know that we'll be in discussion with each other as we exit the space. Hope to see you at another BackChat.
Let's just stick around for some few minutes and then we can move, yeah. How's it? Good. Great, yeah. Otherwise,